Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about terrain again, but this time I want to talk specifically about the battlefield at Bosworth. So a few weeks ago I was very lucky. My wife let me travel up to Bosworth, and we visited the Heritage Centre and had a little bit of a battlefield walk, or a bit more of a car tour, to be honest, because it's quite a lot of walking and my knees aren't quite up to it. But we visited a lot of the locations and I got to sort of really look at the terrain and explore the area. And the reason I wanted to do that is linked to a video I done some weeks ago where I talked about how I think that terrain is important and it needs to make sense geographically. And in the case of the Bosworth battlefield, obviously everyone knows I've been painting Wars of the Roses figures like mad, specifically for that particular battle, and I've collected a lot of maps showing different terrain, different locations, different layouts of the forces and so on. And I plan on a series of games exploring all of these different ones, get as close as I can to the historically accurate battle, but also some of the variations on it, just to try them out. And that's primarily why I've been painting my Wars of the Roses collection so far. But in the pursuit of trying to get the historically accurate terrain, of course, there's a lot of different versions for that. So the idea of where the battle was actually fought has changed enormously over time. But in recent years, there was a proper archaeological survey of the area that found some amazing finds. You know, round shot of various sizes, pieces of tackle, badges and other pieces of equipment that showed really right where the battle was. So there's a big map of the area. Essentially Bosworth, the ambient hill where the battle was supposed to have taken place, is somewhere up here, but the battle actually took place down here. And you can't really see on this Ordnance Survey map, there are lines of altitude on here, but it's actually really hard to see why the battle would have taken place down here and why it looks improbable that it would take place up here, let alone the archaeological evidence. So one of the first things I wanted to do was sort of really get a feel for the lay of the land. Now obviously I was able to physically go there and have a look and see how the hills were around the battlefield, but before I did that I wanted to get an idea of the lay of the land and to see how it fitted in with the written record of the battle. So in a Blue Peter moment I coloured the map in, so I'll put a picture of that up to the side in a minute. But essentially what I've done is I've highlighted the various contours at 5 metre intervals, and what you can see is that there's a river valley in the middle with marshy areas and high ground to the side, ambient hill in bright yellow there, but also the same altitude over here near Dadlington and Stoke Golding. So there is a lot of high ground surrounding, and you can see why the battle took place in this area, because it's largely the most flat area really, just above where the marshy ground would be, but not on the very hilly and uneven terrain surrounding the battlefield. So really there's only really one place you could fit these armies, and the archaeological evidence shows that. And going into that level of detail for this particular battle has actually been really quite informative and interesting, going back and reading the historical sources and seeing how they describe the battlefield and the features on it, and how some of that description has been distorted over time as successive historians have used previous sources and then reinterpreted them or slightly changed. It's like a game of Chinese whispers. You start off with a version of the story, gets altered by a little bit of politics and a bit of Tudor propaganda, and it gets altered again when a different antiquarian comes along, and then you get to the modern age where we're trying to reconcile those various different versions, descriptions of this medieval battle, trying to reconcile it with the environment. And of course the archaeological survey that took place several years ago really helped bring that together and to pin the battlefield to an actual location. We've found finds that are indicative of the actual battle. So as I say, lots of round shots showing, and in particular the way that the round shot is arrayed across the battlefield, you can see that the guns for both sides were placed to the sides of their armies, and they were effectively shooting diagonally across the battlefield. You can see from some of the pieces of tack and the various bits of harness and badges and other little pieces of equipment that have been found and discovered in the ground, show where that battle took place and where the main battle lines would have been. So you can pin down with a reasonable degree of accuracy where the battle actually took place, something that hasn't been possible up till now. So it's been actually a really interesting experience reading about the battle, reading his historical sources, and then getting right up to the more modern age where we've been looking at actual archaeological evidence that sort of ties in with some of those previous descriptions of the battles. Even new techniques like ground penetrating radar and stuff like that have helped determine what areas of land would have been marshy in the time of the battle, where the land has been farmed. So you've got medieval ridge and furrow features still existing in some areas of the battlefield, and indeed I went and had a look at some, and it's quite amazing to think that this is several hundred years old, and still showing in the land, because the land hadn't been farmed. Some areas hadn't been farmed, so some of that medieval landscape is still there. Indeed, some buildings that are associated with the surrounding area are still there. So I visited the church in Dadleton, St James the Greater, for instance, in Dadleton, where some of the dead were supposedly buried. So visiting the battlefield has been really good. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the Wars of the Roses, because I actually stand a chance of actually being able to visit the battlefields that I want to play. Whereas when I'm playing something like the Punic War or North Africa, World War II, I'm not likely to get there. I'll be very lucky if I ever get a chance to run free around a battlefield in Italy, for instance. Maybe one day, but the chances are that I'm more likely to be able to see an English battlefield, and in this particular case, obviously, Bosworth is probably ironically one of the best preserved, because most of the area where the battle took place has not been extensively built on. There is some modern building, and unfortunately there's been some new development on part of the edge of the battlefield. The Battlefield Heritage Centre isn't on the original battlefield, but it's a really good heritage centre. I've said this before, well worth visiting. And from there you get a view of the actual lay of the land. And in a case it's just a small, if you're physically fit, there's a good walk that will take you around most of the battlefield areas. A lot of private land, so you do have to be aware of that and follow the footpaths. Or like me, go around in a car. It's a cheeky stop here and there. So long as you don't go onto the private land, you can stop in the roadside to get a view. It's just a matter of picking your spot, and again, Google Maps, the Ordnance Survey maps, which I was able to download, are excellent resources to help you plan that sort of battlefield trip out, because it actually covers quite a wide area. I don't really appreciate how big a battle, how much ground that this took place over. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, I've got maps from lots of different historians, different periods of time. So there's lots of potential locations. There's a little bit further to the east, down the Roman road that Henry's army would have travelled on. There's another alternative location, literally half a kilometre further down the road. There's another area where there's a marshy piece of ground, and there's a version of a map that says the battle took place there, although the archaeological evidence shows it in its current location. But I can play some of these historical battles, these other versions from these other maps, but using real terrain to help inform how those armies would have marched in. And at some point in the future, it might be good to run on a really big table, perhaps down the Shed of War, and let the players do just that, march their armies on and spend most of the game getting themselves in a position and see where they end up. So lots of potential for Bosworth, and if you're interested in the period and you ever get a chance, do visit the Heritage Centre and have a get round the countryside. It's very interesting. There's lots of features. I'll try and put some links to some of the places that I've visited, and at some point I'm planning on doing a video of that trip and what I saw. So that's it for today, really. Just wanted to tell you a little bit about my passion for maps, and as I say, my Blue Peter moment, colouring in an Ordnance Survey map so that I can see the lay of the land before I physically go there. Well worth doing, an exercise that I recommend actually. Really enjoyed doing that. So as always, I'd love to hear your experiences. Are there any particular battlefields in the UK or indeed anywhere in the world where you've had a chance to really explore them in depth, not only visit them but look at them from different angles and look at the different historical versions of where the battles took place? I'd love to hear your experiences, as always, in the comments below. I hope you found today's video interesting. If you did, please like, subscribe and share, and of course if you want to keep up to date with my weekly videos, please hit the bell notification icon. So until next week, look after yourself, keep gaming, and of course keep rolling high.